Yeah, he does some goofy, weird stuff in his spare time.
Like play bass in his band Dogstar.
Dogstar.
They played Philly a couple months ago, and one of the record stores was like, so Keanu Reeves came in today and was like totally nice and like bought a shirt and some records and just hung out and talked to us for a while. Go see Dogstar. Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your humble host, Sean Hartman, and I'm just happy to be here podcasting with my two good friends, Jeremy Sassy Ruggles and Peter Damian Juan Diego Cook, a.k.a. the Divine One.
Wow. You feeling good, Sean?
Yeah, feeling pretty good.
I don't know what to fucking do now.
You have derailed Jeremy here, Sean. But Jeremy has more than one nickname. He's not just Sassy. I've been told.
Interesting.
That's true. The nickname actually given to me, Sean, was Cranky,
Oh,
not Sassy.
I mean, both can be true.
Yeah, but I prefer the Immaculate One.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll always be sassy to me.
Deal.
I am co-host Peter Cook, but I've been thinking, guys, now that the podcast is starting to take off, we had 12,000 downloads of our Little River Band episode in like 1 week's time. It went viral.
It did. It was wild.
We hit the big time.
Yeah.
And the name Peter Cook, it's fairly common amongst people of note. There was, of course, the British comedian named Peter Cook. There was also an Australian antique dealer named Peter Cook, English footballer with that name, an Australian footballer, an architect, and even the guy, there was a couple architects with that name, in fact, including the fourth husband of Christy Brinkley. There's a lot of Peter Cooks out there. So I've been thinking, we were in Pittsburgh recently, and I had this on my mind as Little River Band was going viral. And I was standing on our porch looking down at the doormat, and I thought, what if I went with Peter Matz with a Z, Matz? I think that might have some zing to it.
It's pretty zingy. I think it could catch on.
Yeah. So I just hope there's no one of note out there with that name.
Probably not.
No, I think, yeah, you're good.
Cool. Well, what did we come to talk about today? Who's leading the charge? Is there a guest?
There is no guest. There is only I, the Cranky One, the Sassy One, the Immaculate and Divine One.
It sounds like a lot of people rolled up in one.
That's true.
Yeah, Jeremy contains multitudes. We've been over this.
Yeah. And in that multitudinous, I have brought Sarah Vaughan's late period, hard left turn, Feelin Good.
Did you find this while we were in Pittsburgh?
I did not.
Oh, you didn't? I remember you asking me where the Sarah Vaughan section was. I helped you find it, so I thought that's where you had found this one.
I was actually trying to find a copy of this for DJ Mahogany, Mark Weathersby, who was there with us, because he was wanting a recommendation, and I was like, oh, that Sarah Vaughan I got, I feel like would be right up his alley. So this is one I've been sitting on for a little over a year in my albums to do thing that it just keeps getting bigger, and with more records, it's not depleting over time.
I have a similar problem. I keep all the time buying records like, oh, I could do this on the podcast, as if I don't already have hundreds of records that were purchased with that very same idea in mind.
Yeah, and then we keep inviting people on to talk about what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
Get a further backlog of our own selections. So yeah, we've had a few guestless episodes lately. We're just trying to talk to the people about records that we want to talk about. Get a few of these out of the way.
Trying to work through the backlog.
Yeah. Well, this one, I'm excited to learn about this one, or just dive into it more, because it surprised me, being just a little familiar with Sarah Vaughan. Not that it's like drastically different, but it's not the Sarah Vaughan that I know of, like the 1950s.
Yeah, calling it a hard left turn might be a bit of an exaggeration.
The album cover made me think it was going to be like a psych funk album or something.
That's actually why I got it originally. I hadn't even heard it, but I saw that cover and was like, oh, I had no idea Sarah Vaughan did a psych record. But it's not a psych record.
Yeah, spoiler. We're going to drop that needle in a second, and it's not going to be super radical, but it will be very good.
Yeah. So I want to start with the first track, And the Feeling's Good, side A, track 1.
And this is 1972. We're going back to that year again.
One by one, all my doubts and fears are disappearing, and the hazy road to life is clearing, feeling steady now, getting ready now. In my mind, sweet and tender thoughts of you are spinning. We're together now, and it's all beginning. I can make it with your help, with you to love, I know I can. Songs keep singing on my way. With you near me, I'll keep growing stronger.
I would say there's a definite light psychedelic vibe to this album. There's just touches of experimental elements going on here and there with the string arrangements, or just like some of the extra instrumentation. There's like one track on here that has some cool kind of fuzz guitar, some wah-wah playing. But one of the big standouts when you listen to this record for the first time is just like the incredible earthiness and range of Sarah's vocals on here. This is not the kind of vocals from her that I had been used to, although admittedly I'm not much of a Sarah Vaughan fan. I'm real picky on jazz vocalists, and she's just never been someone that I heard something that stood out to me, but this album just clicked instantly.
Yeah, I think Jeremy found the Sean Hartman Sarah Vaughan album here.
Yeah, definitely.
I only have one album of hers in my collection, the 1956 album Sassy, her nickname that I think we've mentioned a few times already. And that's more of what I think she was known for, like a torch singer, sad song, similar to maybe to the Joe Williams stuff that we've covered.
Yeah, or even kind of the Julie London or Peggy Lee, a little bit in that vein. Though I'd say a lot of Sarah's stuff was not quite as in the sad realm as some of their things.
It's hard to get quite into is that all there is territory for most people, I think.
Valid.
It's a unique territory. Yeah, this album for me, I I think Sean reacted to it in our group chat before I actually put it on. And when I did, I could see exactly why it would be an album for Sean and why it would be the one that, I don't know how many you have, Jeremy, but I can see why this would be the one to feature. It feels unique. Not knowing a whole lot about her, it feels like a unique entry.
Yeah, it seems like lately you guys have been really forcing me out of my comfort zone with these album picks, like playing all this wordy, soulless bullshit. But listen to this album, it's like, okay, now you're speaking my language. I can get behind this album.
Wow, tell the listeners how you really feel, Sean. You
Just
played
kidding.
it pretty cool. You played it cool on those episodes, but wow.
I'm mad.
Yeah, this borders on kind of the soul jazz. Yeah, it's very Sean's territory that I hijacked. It's kind of a thing I've been doing lately, is hijacking in on your guys' territory. Might find a good Ren Fair album for my next one.
Oh, I look forward to seeing what that is to you.
I love the idea of Jeremy getting into stuff he doesn't like accidentally, but purely out of spite. It's the initial inspiration.
You never know what you're going to get with Mr. Jeremy Ruggles.
That's true. Sarah, as you may have noticed, has an incredible voice. Maybe one of the all-time voices. If you read anything about her, that's what people are going to say is like generational talent. There's I saw this pop up a few times of people being like, she should have been an opera singer because she's too good for this like pop music.
Yeah, I think there's some moments on this where she layers her voice. She's overdubbing, and in some instances she's very low and very high simultaneously between the overdubs. I mean, even that selection we just listened to, the range that she demonstrated was pretty incredible. She got very low.
Yeah, I mentioned when we were listening, like one of the low notes she hit, I'm like, that's like the bottom of my range.
Yeah.
And then she goes like octaves over where I can get on the high range. It's a impressive, range, but almost more to me is like the control, the way she can like very controlled, like break her voice or do vibrato or kind of add all these interesting kind of colors and characteristics to her delivery. That's the part that really gets me listening to any of her work.
Yeah, it's an expressive voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really adds a lot of weight to the songs on here. Like, it's great arrangements and like very nice groovy tracks, but a lesser vocalist would have just ruined the music. Like the stuff she's laying down is just so interesting.
She did use the word groovy on that first selection, so that's also slightly psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's got the feeling of someone, in their 40s trying to do a psychedelic thing.
For the
Maybe
kids.
Not really getting it, yeah.
It's not quite the same thing, but I had some moments that I even thought a little bit about Sinatra's Watertown that we previously talked about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the late era, and this is like, we'll get into it more, but it's kind of like a comeback period where she's trying to like establish herself in a different way.
Well, how about before we play another selection, Jeremy, you tell us just a little bit about Sarah Vaughan.
Yeah, we'll get a little into her story. This is another one of those artists that we're not going to be able to get into everything about her life because she had an insanely long career and a lot of stuff go on in her life. So
Yeah, very prolific, too.
yeah, wildly prolific. I was trying to count. It's like pretty difficult to figure out which albums are actually studio albums, but I think this might be her 35th album.
Yeah, I mean, on All Music, I don't think this album even exists.
Yeah, there's a page for it, but no review.
Okay.
Didn't have the courage to review this album.
Shame on you, All Music, even though I really like a lot of what you've done.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of her background. She was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1924. Sarah's dad was a carpenter, but he also played guitar and piano. Her mom sang in the church choir. Sarah began piano lessons at age 7, pretty reasonable age to start, and also sang in church choir. She was illegally performing at nightclubs as a teenager and eventually just dropped out of high school to pursue music and keep playing these sketchy adult bars as a very young lady.
Yeah, this is circa probably 1940.
Yeah. Yep, would have been right about 1940. At age 18, she won amateur night at the Apollo. And as a result, she got to open for Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I saw that. That's just out the gate, hitting big.
Yeah, they gave her like $10, which maybe back then that was a real amount of money, but
Oh yeah,
$10 and then
that's probably like $100.
yeah. Not too long after this, she was asked to sing for the Earl Hines Band, which at different points included Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker.
Yeah, once again, just instantly, she's mingling with the top cats out there.
Yeah. Around this time, some guy named John Malachi gave her the nickname Sassy that she didn't seem to object to. From what I'd read, it kind of captured her personality. She was sort of wild, supposedly cursed like a sailor.
Yeah, I saw she tended sometimes to write it Sassy, even though it's like on any releases, like the album that I have, it's Sassy.
Yeah.
But it's a nickname, so open to interpretation.
Also open to interpretation is how you guys will feel about the next song we play. Just a Little Lovin', which is the next song on the album, Side A, Track 2.
All right.
Just a little loving early in the morning beats a cup of coffee for starting off the day. Just a little loving when the world is yawning makes you wake up feeling good things are coming your way. This old world wouldn't be half as bad, it wouldn't be half as sad if each and everybody in it had just a little loving early in the morning, a little extra something to kind of see them through. Nothing turns the day on, really gets it dawning, like a little bit of loving from some loving someone like you.
In my research for this episode, I stumbled on a New York Times article that was very quaint to read. It was from 2009. The author was trying to find the song that they had heard on the radio like 20 years before. And it was this song, Just a Little Lovin', by Sarah Vaughan. the author's kind of like gushing about the powers of the internet because people were able to figure out which song it was and had sent them a recording of it. So that was kind of funny and quaint to look back at people being like, wow, the internet.
What infinite possibilities. What a wonderful place.
Yeah. We jest, but compared to what was available in 1972, it's pretty incredible what you can find nowadays. This was released as a promotional single, so it was likely one of the tracks people would have heard from this record.
Yeah, so it got some radio play. Overall, this record was not a hit. It didn't make the charts. As you mentioned, there's no all-music review on it even.
Yeah, and I didn't dig too deep, but it seemed like there just in general wasn't a lot of information out there about it.
Yeah, this is taking place... Well...
Should we get to her story?
Yeah, let's get to her story, and it'll make more sense when we get to that part. So let's jump back in the timeline. We're jumping back to 1945. She is age 21, and she is tired of singing in someone else's band. I'm saying that, not her, actually. But she decides to go solo at this point and signs to a label called Musicraft. This is also around the same time she met and married trumpeter George Treadwell, who became her musical director, and it sounds like gave her a makeover to try and make her more marketable as a pop singer. So in 1948, her career starts to take off because there was a musicians union strike, and it kind of ended Musicraft, the label she was on. So she was able to sign with Columbia in 1948. You know, her career takes off, but she's singing a lot of pop ballads that she's not really into singing, and moves to Mercury Records in 1953, which she kind of moves back towards jazz. Though this is also her commercial peak, including her first gold record, Broken Hearted Melody. Have you guys heard that song before?
I'm not familiar with it offhand.
It's very like 50s. A lot of like doo-wopping and stuff going on.
Okay,
and
yeah,
it sounds very pop.
Oh yeah, that sounds different than the album that I had from the mid-1950s.
Yeah, it was... And I don't know if that was just like a one-off thing, but that album just has a lot of the 50s tropes on it, and is definitely not in the jazz realm that most of her work is in. Her marriage with Treadwell, the trumpeter, was dissolved in 1958, and she found that despite all of the record sales and shows and everything, there was only $18,000 left in the bank. She had let Treadwell handle all her finances. He was either not doing it well or had siphoned off money. That wasn't clear, but yeah. So they split that, and she was left with not a whole lot to show for, you know, quite a bit of commercial success up to that point.
I can't remember. Have we ever talked about an artist that got screwed over by like a manager or member of their team?
No.
It's an uncommon theme in the music world.
Really breaking new ground with this episode. Wow.
Well, don't worry. It's going to happen again
Okay.
right now. She remarries the same year to Clyde Atkins, who she wanted to marry, or she wanted him to manage her, even though he had no experience in doing so. So he got them signed to Roulette Records. It was a smaller label than Mercury that she was on.
I think it was Mafia Run.
That would track. And this marriage didn't last long. Atkins The new guy had gotten violent with her, and she filed for divorce and found that Atkins had put her in $150,000 of debt.
Wow.
Jeez. Out of one frying pan and into another one.
Yeah. Pretty tragic on that front of her life. In 1963, she goes back to Mercury Records, records a live album with producer Quincy Jones.
Heard of.
Sassy swings the Tivoli. But by 1967, she had no recording contract. Jazz had really fallen off by that time. You know, she'd been in the game over 20 years at this point. So, you know, she's not a new, fresh face. Jazz is already uncool. So it's...
I was going to say there's plenty of jazz artists, especially vocal jazz artists, that lost their careers in the mid to late 50s as rock and roll was coming up. So, like, she'd already survived multiple waves of people not being able to make it in that business anymore by that point.
Yep. And she spent 4 years without a record contract. And then she met and fell in love with a concession stand employee, Marshall Fisher. Fisher moved in with her and became her manager. But fortunately, doesn't repeat this pattern and seems to have actually treated her well and like tried to work hard at managing her career at this point.
Yeah, well, that's right, leading right up to the time of this album, correct?
Yeah, she was signed in 1971 to Mainstream Records and began recording pop material. She was doing, you know, well-known songs. And this is her third album into that run with Mainstream Records in 1972.
Yeah, so she's right around 48 years old.
Correct.
I do get a sense of joy from this album. Like, she's really happy to be making this music.
Yeah, it's, I think that's in a lot of her music. If you actually go through her catalog, you know, most of her albums have multiple emotions, but joy is always there.
Mm-hmm.
And she still definitely loves singing. Her voice is deeper by this point than it had been earlier in her career, but her control is still impeccable. Her like technical ability and her ability to just be expressive is unmatched still at this point in her career.
I saw one review online of someone being a little bit dismissive of some of the songs on here, saying like, oh, there's a few good tracks and then some where her voice is just awful and like not worth listening to, which was just the opposite of my experience. Like, the more worn down and like low her vocals get, I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, strong agree with you there. Big disagree with whoever the internet troll was you read. The arrangements on this album, I don't really know who the players were. I couldn't find information on that, but the arrangements were done by Alan Ferguson, Jack Elliott, Michael LeGrand, who her whole previous album to this one, she worked with Michael LeGrand. And, oh no.
What?
The last arranger is named Peter Matz.
Ah! Oh, back to the drawing
Foiled
board.
again.
I know he worked, in all seriousness, I know that Peter Matz worked with Barbra Streisand a whole bunch.
Cool. I did not know that.
Marlene Dietrich.
So this, as I mentioned previously, was not a commercial success. Sarah didn't really have any more commercial success in her singing career. As far as new albums, she's still performing big shows, you know, still has a devoted following across the world, but she did, I found a really interesting album later in her catalog in 1981 of Beatles songs she did with Marty and David Paich of Toto fame.
Yeah. Marty, of course, is a legendary arranger in the business, conductor, arranger, and his son David was one of the instrumental members of Toto in more ways than one. Instrumental.
Atlantic shelved the record initially, saying there wasn't a hit.
Yeah, did that ever come out?
Yeah, you can play it on Spotify.
Okay,
and it's weird. It's like
her doing Beatles songs.
Well, it's her doing Beatles songs, but there's a lot of like 80s synthesizer-y things going on that is like jarring to hear with Sarah Vaughan.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that had ever actually been released.
Yep, it's out there. So she signs with jazz holdout label Pablo in 1982, and then said she was done with labels after that and put out a few more albums.
Side note, those Pablo records are great. That's a label that you can find really, really easily in the dollar bin, and they're not like, the artwork doesn't jump out at you, but it was a label kind of devoted to bringing some of these like older pro jazz musicians who maybe weren't getting as much work, and then giving them like nice curated sessions and making some like very impressive jazz records in the 80s.
Yeah, doing it when it was not cool to be doing that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The true heads call those records Pablo Honey.
No, they don't.
That's not true. That's a Radiohead album.
Oh, is it?
Boy. So Sarah Vaughan continues recording occasionally, and she's doing shows until 1989 when she becomes too ill to perform. She gets diagnosed with lung cancer and was kind of in and out of the hospital until her passing in 1990 at age 66. So at this point, we're going to get to another song, but Sean and Peter overrode me on this one.
Oh, that's right. We ganged up on you about one of your selections.
True, I was leaning once again into the slower, kind of more melancholy material. And they were like, no, Jer, you got to do Rainy Days and Mondays.
Yeah, that upbeat, happy number.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So we're going to do Rainy Days and Mondays. This was the Carpenters, I think.
It was.
Known for this song.
It was, yes. Yeah, you had wanted to feature Alone Again, her version of Alone Again Naturally.
That is accurate.
Originally by Gilbert O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I can't fault almost really any selection off this album. It's very consistent all the way through, but Rainy Days and Mondays was definitely a standout for me.
Same.
Yeah, I considered most of the songs on this album at some point.
Makes sense.
I'd written down Promise Me. I thought about featuring Run to Me because that's a Bee Gees song, and I thought people might find that's cool, even though it's not my favorite.
Well, and her version of Donny Hathaway's Take a Love Song, it gets incredible as it goes along.
Yeah. So it was difficult to pick which songs to go with, but we're going to go with Rainy Days and Mondays. Give Peter and Sean a little voice here.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And this one's side A, track 4.
Talking to myself and feeling old. Sometimes I like to quit. Nothing ever seems to fit. Hanging around, nothing to do but frown. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. What I've got they used to call the blues. Nothing is really wrong. Feeling like I don't belong. Walking around, some kind of lonely clown. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. somebody loves me. Funny, but it seems that it's the only thing to do. Run and find the one who loves me. What I feel has come and gone before. No need to talk it out. We know what it's all about. Hanging around, nothing to do but frown. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down.
Yeah, when I checked this out just today for the first time, I was already enjoying it. But then when I realized what song she was performing there, which I caught on to pretty quickly, being familiar with the Carpenters version, it's like, oh, great, I'm going to enjoy hearing her take on this. And it turned out that I was about to be floored by her take on that song. I'm going to say it. I think she might even surpass Karen Carpenter there.
Whoa.
and that's no easy feat for me. I'm a big Karen Carpenter fan, but she just knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, in every way. I mean, fully showing off that range. It starts real low and then just effortlessly shifts into those high notes, and it almost sounds like a different singer, but man, just incredible talent there. And one thing I thought a couple times listening to this album, but particularly on this song, is there's a real sense of gospel delivery to her vocal style. An artist that reminded me of, in particular, that we've covered before was Mahalia Jackson, who had actually died the same year that this album came out. She passed in January of 1972. So I wonder if Sarah had Mahalia on the brain a little bit during the recording, was channeling that spirit a little bit.
Yeah, it's possible. A little subtle tribute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it leans into her gospel side a little more than a lot of her material.
Yeah. If I think of Mahalia singing "Didn't It Rain" or something, I can hear this being in that same vein.
Yeah.
If listeners were perhaps not able to find any of her 50 albums out there, what would you recommend they check out, Sean?
So a similar album, maybe something that shares some of the elements of this, but could also be found cheap, that kind of thing.
Sounds great. Can you do that?
I could do that. Yeah. Okay.
We might call it recommended similar albums.
Oh. All right, well, here we go. I'm going to give it my best shot. First up, Morgana King, but not the one that we always recommend that we've featured before. I'm recommending the album that she did on Mainstream Records in 1972, entitled Cuore di Mama. So it came out 1 year before New Beginnings, our previously featured and much loved album, but it's really good. And one of the Morgana King records I picked up in Pittsburgh turned out to be a sort of compilation where one disc is that album that I just mentioned, and then the other one was some selections from earlier in her career. So I'm excited to dig into that album a little bit more, but it's a similar kind of torch singer type vibe that we all love.
Funny enough, it was after we featured the Morgana King album that I realized I needed some more female vocal jazz in my collection, and picked up some Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday stuff.
Yeah, we could all use more of it in our collections. Next recommendation, another artist who was recording for Mainstream Records around the same time, Carmen McRae, recommending her album The Sound of Silence from 1968. Another one that has a similar kind of vibe to this. It's jazz vocals, but there's some pop covers and a little bit of leanings and influence from the psych pop world of that time.
Does she cover the Disturbed song, Sound of Silence, on there?
Yes.
Amazing.
Next recommendation, another one that has a little bit of that psychedelic leaning, Nancy Wilson's Kaleidoscope from 1971.
Oh, I don't know that one. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, keep an eye out for it. Another incredibly talented vocalist and someone with a lot of records in the dollar bin that I'm sure we'll be covering at some point. All right, and I have one bonus recommendation that is mostly just for our Australian listeners because it's really not ever been released outside of there. But the album Marcia Shines by the artist Marcia Hines from 1975. A soul singer who, like a surprising amount of other soul singers, got her start as a cast member for the version, well, she was in Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar, specifically the Australian versions of those, and put out a couple albums that are not too expensive, just haven't been released all over the world. So you can find it online if you can't dig up a physical copy.
I'm guessing that you became aware of that album, Sean, because the title is a pun on the artist's name.
It's a definite standout for me. That's a big, it's a big point in any album's favor if it's got a pun album title.
What was the Lalo Schifrin album that you found the other day?
A whole Lalo Schifrin going on.
Oh my God.
Instant 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Sean, for those recommended similar albums. Since we don't have a guest to give us plugs for what they have going on at this point, we'll just remind the listeners that you can always follow us on Instagram at I'd Buy That Podcast, as well as on Facebook. Search for I'd Buy That for $1. There's also the Facebook group that you can join and post your recent finds from the bins across the world. Pretty good little group, little community going on there nowadays.
Yeah, it's always fun to see other stuff people are finding and throwing out there. There's a few that I've gotten just because I've seen people post and I was like, oh, I bet that's interesting. So go check it out.
Yeah. Find us on the interwebs. Do we have any final thoughts on this Sarah Vaughan record before we introduce our last selection?
I think I'm in my late period era myself now. I'm just digging more and more artists who had a nice big full career and the work they put out later on in their lives that's informed by all the things they lived through. And we didn't get too much. I mean, you can dig into Sarah's life and there's a lot there beyond her, marriages and stuff. She was also a lifelong cocaine user, was known to hit the sauce pretty hard at times. She just lived a full and wild life with lots of highs and lows. So I'm really digging into people's kind of looking back on that or incorporating all of that they've lived through.
I think we've established on this show at this point that all three of us are big fans of late period sad crooner albums. It's something we can always, all three of us, get behind.
Yep. That specific subgenre of late period.
Yeah.
We're all here for that.
Someone should write a book about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You are the book writer amongst us, Sean.
Yeah, you've authored a book every few weeks since we started the podcast. So,
I can't be certain, but I feel like I may have actually written a book about it already.
Yeah. I believe you did. I know you're so prolific. It's hard to remember.
It could have also been like a compilation album. I don't know. I don't like to look back, I'm just always moving forward.
Well, that has been proven by your industriousness.
Thank you.
So, Jeremy, what was the final song that you wanted to play today?
Final song I wanted to feature today is When You Think of It. And it's another slow burner, another fantastic vocal delivery from Sarah Vaughan. Who'da thunk it?
The final song on the album, written by Robert Allen, known for writing hits for Perry Como and Johnny Mathis, amongst others.
Yeah. And arranged by Peter Matz.
I forgot to mention that Peter Matz was born in Pittsburgh, so it all tied together when I said I thought of it in Pittsburgh.
All of it ties together. It's beautiful.
Well, excellent. We will listen to that as we head out the door here. Thank you for listening to I'd Buy That for $1. This is Peter Cook signing off.
I'm Jeremy Ruggles.
And I'm Sean Hartman.
When you think of it, it was really a ball. We had everything, and it's nice to recall how we lived, how we loved, while it lasted. When you think of it, when you add it up, all the good and the bad, there was so much more of the sweet than the sad. There were tears, but the laughs lasted longer. When you think of it, remember me, the smiling brave one, the night we said goodbye.